Hello, I'm Matt Donnelly, and this is your Minnesota Vikings versus the Philadelphia Eagles game preview for week number 2. This is part 2 of NFL's Monday night doubleheader. In this game, it features those Minnesota Vikings fresh off taking down Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. And we have the hometown favorites here, the Philadelphia Eagles, who started their 2022 campaign in victorious fashion there, knocking off the Detroit Lions. Now, with those week 1 performances, you have to believe that both the Eagles and the Vikings are now in pole position here to win their divisions. So remember, this week's contest right now, this could be a playoff preview. Something to keep in mind as we go through this tale of the tape, starting with the quarterback position and Kirk Cousins. We're not talking Nickelodeon. We're not talking Rocco's Modern Life. No one's about to get slimed here. And Kirk Cousins, he certainly is no Jared Goff. Even though lots of people out there seem to be putting this out there each and every week, we need to start putting some respect on this man's name. Sometimes being great isn't about always being great. It's about knowing who to get the ball to, where that greatness is going to come from. Think smarter, not harder is often what I always say here. And I know as well as anybody, if I get the ball in Justin Jefferson's hands, good things are going to happen. As Jefferson gets statistics, so will I. And so does Kirk Cousins here. Now, last week against the Packers, Cousins threw for 277 yards, 2 touchdowns, and finished with a passer rating of 118.9. Cousins has averaged over 4,000 yards passing, 31 touchdowns over the last 4 seasons, and that was with Mike Zimmer as the head coach there. So in Kevin O'Connell's offense, you have to believe things are going to open up for Kirk Cousins, and that was just week number 1. Fun fact, Kirk Cousins has now tossed a touchdown in 31 consecutive games, which happens to be the longest such streak in the National Football League. Philadelphia, they have one of the more talented front fours in the NFL. However, they just lost Derek Barnett for the season because of an ACL injury. Last week, the Eagles, they only sacked Jared Goff once on 37 passing attempts. They only hit him 6 times. So if the Eagles want to disrupt Kirk Cousins and this passing game here, they have to get after him. Whether that's Jordan Davis, whether that's Fletcher Cox, it doesn't matter. Someone's got to step up for this Eagles team. As far as quarterback position is concerned, Eagles, they have no problem over there. Last November, I told Eagles fans right off the get-go, you are in good hands. Jalen Hurts was not just the quarterback of the present back then. He was the quarterback of the future. If you have any questions about that now, you should check yourself. Now, look, how good has Hurts been? How about the fact that he's the first quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards and rush for over 1,000 yards within his first 20 career NFL starts? Yes, that's something that even Lamar Jackson's not done. Kyler Murray, he hasn't accomplished that. This is Jalen Hurts and what he's capable of doing. Week 1 versus the Lions, he would rank 3rd in passing grade there, and he was also the most accurate passer on throws past the sticks while being blitzed 50% of his dropbacks, which happened to be the 2nd most. Hurts got the job done last week, as he always has. He's done it with his arm. He does it with his legs. And while he threw for 243 yards last week against the Lions, he also added 90 more on the ground with a 5.3 yards per carry average and scoring his lone touchdown with his legs. Now, Minnesota, they will be looking at getting after him, much like they did Aaron Rodgers last week, as they sacked the reigning MVP on 4 occasions, hitting him 5 more times on 39 passing attempts. Danielle Hunter there, Zadarius Smith. These are guys who are looking for repeat performances against the Konami Code quarterback himself this week. Now turning our attention to the running back position, Dalvin Cook. Why isn't anyone talking about Dalvin Cook's opening day performance? It's not like a 90-yard day on 20 carries is bad or anything. Overshadowed, perhaps, but bad, no. Add in another 3 receptions for 18 yards, and that's a pretty good week from your back there. Now, Cooks, he's still ranked inside the top 10 last week in both opportunity and targets. Perhaps this week is the week that Cook overshadows Justin Jefferson. Well, maybe not, but hey, let's dream here for a second. Deandre Swift averaged 9.6 yards per carry against this Eagles defense on his way to 144 yards. Not only did the Eagles struggle at stopping the run last week, but they also allowed DeAndre Swift 31 yards on 3 receptions. Now, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. And what is the real significance behind this? But when you look back at last season's numbers, the Eagles actually surrendered the 8th most receiving yards to running back. So that's something to keep in mind as we move on here in week number 2. As far as the other Vikings running back is concerned, we're talking about Alex Madison here. He would carry the ball 8 times against the Packers, averaged 4.5 yards per carry on his way to 36 yards. Now, Madison, he's not really going to be a factor in this offense as long as Dalvin Cook is in there. So simply put, look at the numbers here. 19% snap share. That's simply not enough to become fantasy relevant in any given week. Now, turning your attention to some backs who are fantasy relevant, regardless of what this share looks like. How about the Eagles stable of running backs here? Starting with Miles Sanders. Stop the presses. Miles Sanders has now taken that monkey off his back, and he scored a touchdown last week against the Detroit Lions. Yes, that's right. You heard me correctly. Miles Sanders, he found the end zone. Now, looking back to last season, the Eagles, they were one of the top running teams in the National Football League. And while they are transitioning to more of a passer-friendly offense, we know that they can still run the ball as good as anyone. Even though the Eagles, for whatever reason, they seem to hate Miles Sanders. But look, he's been able to get the job done. Against the Lions, he had 13 carries, 96 yards, and that touchdown. One of 4 Eagles scores on the day. All 4 of them came on the ground. This shouldn't surprise us. Last season, Sanders, 912 scrimmage yards last season on just 163 touches, which works out to about 5.6 yards per touch. Currently, Sanders' efficiency has him ranked 7th as far as yards per touch is concerned. So if the Eagles decide to give him the ball, production is going to follow. And against a defense that allowed the 4th highest rushing success rate last week, you have to think that someone on this Eagles team, someone in this Eagles backfield is going to produce this week. Now, the other 2 options here in the running game are Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott. Everyone got a touchdown in Philadelphia last week. We talked about Boston Scott's touchdown, Kenneth Gainwell, Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders. This is a 4-pronged rushing attack in Philadelphia. Looking at those snaps and how they were divided up in week number 1, Sanders, he received a 52% snap share. He got those 13 carries and a pair of targets. Gainwell was next in line there, 32% of the snaps, including 5 carries, and he was targeted on 4 of 7 routes. And then finally, we have Boston Scott, who saw a 16% snap share with 4 carries, running a route on 5 different occasions. Green Bay showed last week that you can run on this Vikings team. The Packers duo of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, they actually averaged 6.2 yards per carry and producing 111 yards on just 18 attempts there. So unfortunately, though, for the Packers, they had to abandon this run game early because they got so far behind because nothing was clicking in the passing game. And the Vikings, they got out and they got ahead of them. Now, turning our attention to the wide receivers, we know we have a couple full-out studs going at it here in Justin Jefferson and A.J. Brown, but let's focus on the Vikings pass catchers first. I think it's safe to say that Justin Jefferson is going to be even better than advertised in this Kevin O'Connell offense. Remember, this is the same offense that saw Cooper Kupp finish with 191 targets a season ago, lead the league in receptions, lead them in targets, lead them in yards, lead them in touchdowns, lead them in breakfast dinners with their quarterbacks. I mean, this is how good Cooper Kupp was in the offense. And Justin Jefferson, I think he's going to be even better. Green Bay, they did not have an answer for Justin Jefferson a week ago. He got his gritty on there and recording 9 receptions on 11 targets, and 2 of them, they resulted in touchdowns. He actually accumulated 184 receiving yards. This was all done in basically 3 quarters of play of action as the Vikings basically eased off on the gas pedal. Expectation here is that Jefferson is likely going to be seeing Darius Slay rather than James Bradbury. Slade, he didn't have a great game against the Lions. DJ Chark, I mean, Chark did get past him on that touchdown there, and Slade did finish with a 90-plus rating there as far as coverage is concerned. That said, Minnesota, they did a great job of moving Justin Jefferson around in the formation there, and for the most part, they were able to keep Jair Alexander away from him. The other pass catcher here for the Minnesota Vikings of note is Adam Thielen. I mean, hey, he's the wily old vet there. He can still get the job done, right? If Slade travels with Justin Jefferson, then it's going to be Adam Thielen versus James Bradbury. That's going to become a thing if we see that traveling Slade show going on there. Bradbury, he played well in week 1, not allowing anything on 6 times in which he was targeted. Bradbury, in fact, had more catches himself than what he had yielded. So if Jefferson is essentially Cooper Kupp on steroids in this offense, that must mean Adam Thielen will fill that Robert Woods, Odell Beckham Jr. type role in this offense. Last week, Thielen had 3 catches on 4 targets for 36 yards. There will be better days ahead for Thielen, but understand there are going to be some down weeks as well. Keep an eye on Thielen's average depth of target and his yards per route run. Last week, Thielen averaged 1.2 yards per route run, while that ADOT was about 6.8. Maybe it's something, maybe not, but just keep that in the back of your mind here. And finally, hey, let's talk about one more receiver. Let's talk about KJ Osborne real quick. We already know that Thielen and Bradbury's thing and Justin Jefferson and Darius Slay's thing. Then KJ Osborne is likely going to draw Avonte Maddox here this week, who is probably the weakest link in this Eagles secondary, who allowed a 107.6 passer rating himself at an 83% catch rate. It may not matter much here as Osborne only had a 13.3% target share in week number 1. Philadelphia, they played this pass extremely well, and we haven't even talked about their other newest addition there in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who will also factor into this contest at some point. Now for the Eagles, we have A.J. Brown. It is never a bad idea to get the ball into your playmaker's hands. Hey, Kirk Cousins, I'm patting you on the back. You know what to do. You know where your bread is buttered. Well, Jalen Hurts, he's got himself a little bit of weapon there as well. Hurts certainly did everything you needed to do to get Brown involved in this game. Here were 13 targets that led to 10 receptions and 155 yards in his Eagles debut. Those 155 yards were only 14 fewer than all the Titans receivers combined. I'm fully expecting another week from Brown, maybe even bigger than last week, as Patrick Peterson is in all likelihood going to be drawing that coverage assignment. Watching that Packers-Vikings film from a week ago, it appeared that rookie Romeo Doubs, he was basically giving Patrick Peterson as much as he could handle at times. Now, Devontae Smith. It's tough to get a real feel for these Vikings corners as the Packers, they didn't really test them. And judging from Smith's week 1 usage, one would have to think that Cameron Dantzler probably is not going to get tested very often again this week. But I feel there's an overcorrection coming here this week, and Smith is going to have a much larger role than a zero-catch performance from a week ago would lead us to believe. Nick Sirianni there said this week that he, talk about Devonta Smith, has to touch the ball. Devonta Smith is not a good playmaker. He's a great playmaker. I think everybody in the city saw that on hand last season. But maybe the best quote of the week, and I'm talking about all the quotes across the board, was the one from Darius Slay himself. We've got 3 Batmans on this team. We got the swole Batman in A.J. Brown. We got the skinny Batman there in Devonta Smith. And we got the fast Batman there in Quez Watkins. We ain't got no Robins. Now, turning your attention to the tight ends, there's no Robins in the tight end position here either. There's definitely no Batmans either. For the Minnesota Vikings, Irv Smith Jr. Are you still waiting for that Irv Smith Jr. breakout? Me too. So, know right now that you are not alone. I know we made fun of Tyler Higbee in this type of offense last season, but right now, I think I'd be kind of happy to see a Higbee-type involvement from Smith this week. If you are still holding out some kind of hope for Smith, I leave you with this stat to hold near and dear to your heart. Philadelphia allowed the most receiving touchdowns to tight ends last season and the 6th most receiving yards to the position. So I'm saying there's a chance. And finally, the Eagles tight end here, Dallas Goddard. Last season, after Zach Ertz was dealt, Goddard would rank top 3 in yards per route run, yards per reception, fantasy points per target, and target separation. After 1 week with A.J. Brown, Goddard's stat line basically follows as such. 3 receptions on 4 targets, 60 yards. Look for Harrison Smith to be matched up on Goddard this week. And although Smith seems to be getting up there in age, he can still manage to get the job done. He still managed to pick off Aaron Rodgers last week. And he made a couple big tackles in the open field, including one on Aaron Jones. With that all being said, if you want to tackle the competition right now, head to fantasypoints.com. Use promo code 22Vipers10. Get 10% off that subscription today. We got all kinds of packages over there, from golf to football, the NFL, fantasy football, college football, you name it, we got you covered. So check that out, and we'll see you next week.